we need to repeal the FACE Act. I understand it's a tall lift for the Senate, but this needs to happen. It was an illegal law when it was passed, and it's been illegally used. We have the numbers after 30 years. Over, I think it was 97% of the cases, 205 arrests out of 211 have been against pro-lifers, even though the law ostensibly is supposed to protect churches and places of worship and reproductive health centers, the crisis pregnancy centers.
I'm here with Paul Vaughn in the latest of our series on the pardoned pro-lifers who were convicted under the FACE Act and pardoned by President Trump. Could you tell us a little bit about what it was like to be convicted under the FACE Act?
Well, sure. It's kind of a long time coming. We were active in the early 90s doing rescue and pro-life counseling on the streets and stuff when the FACE Act was handed down. And, we thought we were obeying the rules that they laid down 30 years ago. And all of a sudden we find out that now we're being charged with FACE when we didn't do any of the underlying offense. So it was very surprising, to say the least.
What did they say that you did that violated FACE?
Well, FACE makes it a felony, a federal offense, rather, to block or intimidate or impede the entrance to an abortion clinic. And so that's what they said I did. But, of course, I didn't do those things. There were people that day of the event in March of 21 at the Carafem clinic that sat down at the doors and intentionally blocked the door to try to interpose on behalf of the unborn. I wasn't one of them. I was a sidewalk counselor. We talked to people coming in and out. We talked to the police officers. We prayed. We sang hymns, just typical sidewalk type ministry. It was in a multi-use building, so it wasn't on the sidewalk. It was in the hallways, but it was still a public, access building, and that's where we were. So it's very, they couldn't have got me under FACE, but they used a conspiracy law that they intentionally applied it in such a way as to bring myself and another one of the co-defendants into the trial.
And a SWAT team came to your house in front of some of your 11 children, correct?
That's right. 18 months later, so the event was March of 21, October 5th of 22, after the fall of Roe, and June of 22. 4 armed agents in tactical gear with long guns, weapons of war, and pistols, and everything else show up at my door, banging on the house at 7 o'clock in the morning, and open up FBI, and just a very Gestapo-style raid, and arrest me at gunpoint. Literally, open the curtain of my door to see a pistol and a weapon, automatic weapon, trained on me. A trigger away from being shot.
Wow! And then you were on house arrest.
Yeah. So we ultimately didn't go to trial till January of 24. And then weren't sentenced until July of that same year, 24. And we received 6 months house arrest, and then and 3 years parole.
Wow.
So
what was that like?
Well, in a normal Christian family, you have a husband and a wife making decisions for their children and life every day. And from the time we were arrested in October of 22 until ultimately until the pardon came down in January, we had the government in our bedroom. Every time we wanted to go somewhere out of the Middle District of Tennessee, we couldn't go without asking the parole officer. Once we were on house arrest, I couldn't go anywhere except for work and church, and very limited, obviously, in our travel there. So it was like having a third party in our marriage.
Wow. And what was it like to find out that you were pardoned?
Yeah, it was a mix of emotions, to be honest. It was a great joy. We greatly appreciate President Trump and where he is and his keeping his campaign promises. That was a big thing, and we were rejoicing. Obviously, more so. My house arrest had just ended on January 2nd, and this came down on January 23rd. So I'd been off house arrest for 21 days or whatever. So it wasn't a big deal to us. Obviously, another 2.5 years of parole was huge for us personally, but we had friends in prison, and there had been people from D.C. Rescue and from other rescues that had been in prison for over a year and had some of them facing up to 5 years. So we were greatly rejoicing on their behalf, more so even than our own at some level. Now, the other side of the coin, it was also kind of depressing and in a sense of, oh, well, now you're done. Sorry, the process is a punishment. Took 2.5 years, 26 months out of your life, and you suffered all these things, and you went through and risked being shot by FBI agents that were, illegal on your property, illegally using the law against us and all the lawfare and all that. So there's the question of, well, where is the justice? We appreciate the pardon, but Americans shouldn't live under the threat of their government coming and busting in their life and wrecking their life for 2 years just to walk away and say, oh, we're sorry now.
What needs to happen for you and the others with similar experience to get justice for that?
Sure. I think, ultimately we know all of us are mainly Christians, and we understand there is eternal justice, and God's justice is the best, and we're not concerned, ultimately with that from our own perspective. But then there's also the public duty to our fellow men and to other pro-lifers and to other, quite honestly, people across the spectrum. If you are opposing the correct narrative, then you risk this kind of Gestapo action. And so we're looking at what little bit of law is available to us to go after a potential suit, to hold the government accountable for these actions, to make sure that doesn't happen in the future. And then the other aspect of this, Elizabeth, is we've been here in D.C. talking about the FACE Act with Heritage Foundation, and, we need to repeal the FACE Act. I understand it's a tall lift for the Senate, but this needs to happen. It was an illegal law when it was passed, and it's been illegally used. We have the numbers after 30 years. Over, I think it was 97% of the cases, 205 arrests out of 211 have been against pro-lifers, even though the law ostensibly is supposed to protect churches and places of worship and reproductive health centers, the crisis pregnancy centers. So the FACE Act needs to go.
Representative Roy spoke at that FACE Act event and said that he is going to make sure there's a vote on this, even if there's resistance from Republicans in the House. Why do you think it's really important to move forward on getting rid of the FACE Act?
Well, I think it's just a standard piece of legislation, a standard response and a duty, really, for our elected representatives that are elected to serve the people. And there's an understanding about the FACE Act itself as the government weighing in on the public narrative and our public discussions around abortion. And so if you think of it as a waterfall effect, when they made it a felony to go and sit down and do a sit-in, which is a common American practice of protest, and it's not technically what Christians were doing as a sit-in, they're more interposing, trying to save babies. But if you just take the sit-in aspect of it and understand that as a protest, and that there's all these other elements of the pro-life movement, whether it's sidewalk counselors, whether it's crisis pregnancy centers, whether it's people that are lobbying in a political arm of it, or the legal and legislative arm as well. So when you take and make something a federal offense at the doors, then that has a ripple effect all the way through the pro-life community, and it weights that scale of that discussion for our public discussion. And so it really takes, if you think of Americans, we look at numbers on TV, we see a protester, we see something going on, and we drive by and see a bunch of people out at a commerce center or someplace downtown, and we go, oh, well, that's 12 people. I wonder who those crazy people are. Oh, there's 10,000 people there. Well, that must be something I should check and see what that is. And that's the way that it weights that discussion and changes the public opinion. And the government said, you can talk about all these other things, but don't talk about the unborn babies. They're off limits. So that's the other reason, really, for American life and our republic. It depends on free speech as a invaluable foundation for everything that we hold dear in life and liberty and pursuit of happiness.
Absolutely. What would your message be to President Trump after pardoning you and the 22 others?
Well, first, thank you. I mean, obviously, gratitude and just great respect, again, for keeping his promises. But I would also say that we have to be consistent with our message, and that if we believe the unborn are humans, as we all are and always were from the moment of conception, then there is no number to look for, whether it's 6 weeks or 12 weeks or any other number that's going to be consistent in applying some kind of law to the concept of abortion or terminating unborn children. Mm-hmm. So we need consistency, and we need leadership in that. And we need that narrative to shift so that we as the people in America can begin taking responsibility for our actions, and we can begin cherishing and loving life from the moment of conception. At Personhood Alliance, our slogan, or kind of our ideology, is that human life equals human rights. And it's that simple. From the moment you're a human, you have rights in this country, and you're valued, and you reflect the image of God, and we want to protect that.
Absolutely. Is there anything else you'd like to add about this?
No, I appreciate you sitting down and the Daily Signal covering all the pro-lifers and those that have been persecuted. And, I would encourage the Americans, the church in America, just broadly. There is a there's a story to be told, and God's telling the story. And the FBI meant intimidation and fear to be the message that went through the American church and went through specifically the pro-life community. When they came to my door and knocked on the door, they knocked on every door in America with this message. And I hope that what people are seeing is that God is faithful and we can trust him. And all we have to do is just be a little bit courageous and stand up and speak truth, even if all the cultural pressure is against us and says the unborn baby don't have value, or that, whatever the narrative is. If you have a truth and conviction in your faith, you can just stand and say that pleasantly with a smile, and you can trust that God will show up and do the work, and ultimately that our culture will be better because of it. So I just hope the church would be encouraged by our suffering and our meager persecution in this, and that hopefully ultimately it just enables and encourages folks to be what they're supposed to be in Christ, and that is a Christian with a heart to love and serve your neighbor, and do it with a smile and with great joy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for everything you're doing on this and for joining us the show.
Thanks for having us.
Subscribe to get the news the legacy media won't tell you and only the Daily Signal can bring to you.